some are still eating their food, and the others who have are going to get sleepy about it in the next 15 minutes. So I think our objective as a panel here is to really keep it to be an exciting conversation, and we are hoping that we'll also be able to take some questions on from you. So, but before I do set the context, I thought a brief introduction with the panel members. Let them introduce themselves so you're aware of their background. So since I have the mic, I'll just give a quick background about myself. Like I was introduced, I'm a partner with Ernst & Young. I actually lead the government and public sector practice in EY, and I think a large part of the work which is happening with the current government around digital India and cybersecurity, I get to see that on a first basis and the impact of it, and I hope some of those impacts and changes we'll be able to discuss in the moderation today.
Thank you, and thank you for the great lunch and for being here. I love being here in India. It's a great honor and a pleasure. I've been enjoying a lot of stuff. We can do that in the break. So my name is Kai Wood. I come from Norway in Europe, far away. There's winter there. This is like our summer. In addition to being the owner of the Roar Group and security culture coach, I am the president of Cloud Security Alliance in Norway. I am a co-founder and the CEO of a company called Culture, CLT.RE, which focuses on security culture and measuring behavior, ideas, and customs of people from a security perspective. Although my background, more than 20 years of ICT and security background, my current focus is on psychology and sociology. So looking at people, what goes on in between their ears, behind their eyes, stuff like that. In addition to this, I was appointed a fellow at the National Cybersecurity Institute in Washington some years ago. This year I received the Ron Node Award of volunteering service from CSA. And I work with research institutions and universities in Europe and the US to further understand and research security culture. More about me we can take in the break. Thank you.
So I'm Ranjit Singh Chima. I serve as Policy Director with Access now. Access is an international non-profit organization set up, in fact, fairly young, now around 6 years. 6 years ago it was established, which works as an international non-profit helping with focusing on the mission statement of protecting and advancing the rights of digital rights of users at risk. Access has a public policy team, an advocacy team, and a technology team focused on protecting the rights of users. And just by way of introduction, what in fact genesis of this organization was as a digital security group set up after uprisings and concerns globally when people were worried about targeting activists, targeting reporters, talking about elections, talking about democratic governments, talking about the need to have open functioning governments. And it was a focused effort to make sure that when people can connect online, they can connect securely, they can connect without fear, and they're able to realize their rights online. I serve as policy director, which means that my job is to try and focus on my team's, my global public policies team's work on engaging with governments, lawmakers, and companies globally on how to advance digital rights, particularly around privacy, free expression, digital security and cybersecurity, and business and human rights. I also, in India, I'm a volunteer with the SaveTheInternet.in coalition, which works in net neutrality. And why I mentioned that is that I think as part of this conversation, we'll be talking about mass engagement on these sometimes complex technical issues. And in the previous lifetime, I used to work in Google's public policy team. So I'm always interested in the very wide and multi-stakeholder discussions that take place on things like digital security and the internet more broadly.
I'm Vijay Varadarajan. I'm a professor, a Microsoft Chair Professor at Sydney, Australia. I did PhD, I've been in security for almost 30 years. I used to run Hewlett Packard's security research worldwide, based in Palo Alto and UK, Bristol for 10 years. I'm on the advisory board at Microsoft at Redmond. I'm on the advisory board at SAP at Waldorf and at Palo Alto. I'm on the advisory board at Hewlett Packard at Palo Alto. I'm part of the Prime Ministerial Task Force Security here in India, as well as the Prime Ministerial task force in Australia. I'm an advisor to Minister in Communications in Australia. But my daytime bread and butter job is actually I run a research center. We get funded by all sorts of places, including defense and Office, Cabinet Office, Microsoft, that kind of institutions. And I've also been on a minister to the European Union Commission and to the UK Department of Trade. So I've been in UK, US, Switzerland, and currently in Australia. And I would love to, so my area in security ranges from the area from operating system, distributed systems, applications, financial, healthcare markets. So it's a variety. So I've been in this space for about 30 years. And I'm looking forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vijay, Ramanji, and thank you so much for the introduction. Just to set the context for the audience here, I think in the role that I also play in the organization, I think I'm constantly asked this question of what is digital, and I think while we've been working on digital technologies for the last 50 odd years, or working on similar stacks and protocols for maybe the last 20 years, and maybe we've been using terms like online, e-commerce, but what's really differentiating digital for us, and that's wherein I think lies the context to the conversation today. I think from my perspective, digital is the how of the technology interaction, and of course the underlying technology in the background, which is purely in the background, and the interaction is what has made it a far more usable and friendlier technology offering. And I think that's really created that differentiator, and really bringing it to the context of today's discussion, that if digital is differentiator, larger differentiator being the interaction with technology, then is security, can it pose a challenge, or what is the industry and the community's expectations from that it doesn't pose a challenge for it. It really continues to appeal to the ask of being the simplistic approach to how I interact as an end user or as an enterprise user to technology. So with that, maybe I'll just pose a few questions to the fantastic panel here, and maybe Guy, I'll start with you since you're on my left and not my right. I think with your introduction, I think one fascinating question, which at least I would like to position you as, I think most of the people here, if they are security practitioners, I think we all talk about people process technology from a security perspective, and I think you do deal in detail with the people dimension, and that's where the cultural aspect comes in. So how do you really measure that portion of it? When you talk about culture, the security culture itself, because that sometimes is the weakest chain in, you might have the best technology and best processes to support it, but it's the people which let you down. So behind the eyes and between the ears, what's going on and how do you measure it?
Thank you very much for that question. So this is a question that I agree with you. A lot of people, just like you, wonder how do we see and can measure security behavior, security culture. This question I come along based on the awareness discussion. We have been doing security awareness trainings for at least 20 years, and a lot of us were frustrated because we didn't see any change. People didn't change. They still clicked over the same links, they still got fished, they still did all this stuff that we wanted to change them away with. Now, this spurred an interest in me, and I did a research project looking into what are the differences or the key critical success factors of those companies and organizations who are successfully changing security behavior, and what are those of those who fail. And what we saw there is that there are those who have success, they do 4 things. Actually, they do a 5th one, I'll get back to that. But number 1, they define clear goals. What do we want to see? What kind of behavior do we want to see here? And then they also then put that back to today. What is the current situation? So create a baseline, use some kind of metrics, put in some sort of measurements, and figure that out. I'll get back to how to do that. Second thing they did, they involve the organization, and they understand that in a large organization, people are different. You have a sales department. The sales guys are very different from the security guys. I'm sure you agree with me on that. Then imagine the marketing guys with these funny jumping guys, right? And the auditors, probably the opposite. Now, if we continue to do the same trainings for all of these people, there is no wonder why we fail. Because they have different perspectives, different needs, different ideas and customs and social behavior, which impact their security. So we need to change that side of it. That's the second thing. The third thing is only when you know your goal and who you are talking to, you start looking at the real activities. So instead of buying just whatever security awareness training that are proposed to you this year, you start by understanding my goal and my current situation and who am I talking to. Then you pick the trainings that are relevant, not the other way around. Then you plan, you measure before and after, you do a revision every time because we want to learn what is working, what is not, and then you just redo this cycle over and over and over. It turns into a process. What I just described for you is what we put into the security culture framework. Free and open. It's available online, just look up security culture framework. It's been used by organizations around the world today. It's quickly becoming the de facto standard of how to build and maintain security culture. Now, so your question there was, how do we measure behavior? This is a question that a lot of technical guys have been thinking, so it's impossible to measure behavior. But then let's take a look at social sciences. Social sciences have been measuring behavior and culture for centuries. Somewhat successful, especially in the beginning, but later, the past 40, 50 years, we have seen a lot of interesting methods and techniques we can use to measure culture. So from a psychological perspective, we see experiments and assessments, self-assessments. From sociology, we do analytics like semiotics or other strange words like that, at least to us IT guys. And from social anthropology, we observe from outside and then try to infer the differences between what we have today and what they have. What I have been doing is create a tool to use the social science techniques and methods to measure security behavior automatically using these principles. So that's one side of it. You ask people, you observe them, and you learn from that. The other side is what some of the companies, at least here in exhibitions, are doing, is observing real behavior on the networks. So everything I do on my network, everything you do on your networks and your systems, leave trails. These trails we can track. And then we can see, so okay, this guy, Kai, he self-rated himself as a firer. He believes he's really good at security behavior. But then when we look at Kai in his network, we see that he scores 1.5. He really is bad. He don't know anything about security behavior, right? So taking these two sources together, we can identify those people who think they are great, but fail, like myself, or those who are great on both sides, or those who are poor on both sides. And then we can segregate and train them as they need to be trained, not from our perspective.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Ramanjit, one for you, and something we just briefly touched upon before we started this discussion. I think in the role that you're playing, you have an opportunity to, of course, interact with policymakers, lawmakers on one side, and of course with your background from the industry. How do you see security sometimes becoming a complex affair, because all these forces, be it policy and lawmakers on one side, the industry and the civil society, might have contrary views or expectations, and that sometimes really make the security measure far more complex one. So what are your thoughts, and have you propagated as in your current role with Access now, how exactly are you dealing with it, and what exactly are you propagating to really look at everybody converging on a simple fact of making security a simpler thing and not really an added pain to all of us?
Thanks, Rob. So I was going to say that security should be simple, but people don't always let it be simple. And like that's the thing that's interesting to like respond to. As I mentioned, organizations is an interesting, I would say it's not a hybrid. You're used to the fact that companies, for example, do many different things. Non-profits and governments also do many different things. So as I mentioned, although I don't do technology work, I keep saying I'm limited. I'm a lawyer. I know HTML. I know a little bit of coding, and I used to like to take apart telephones when I was a kid and put them back together. So I can say I have network operations in my blood, but I'm not a technical specialist. But we do have a technology team, and in fact, what we run as part of that is a 24/7 digital security helpline. And why I always find that useful in my role when I speak to policymakers is you can break it down into what's actually happening to people. It's not an abstract discussion. For example, many of you in this room and even elsewhere would have heard about encryption. You would have heard about government debates about encryption. Should people be able to access secure communication services? Should there be backdoors? Should government have access to encryption keys? In India, you've heard this since before the Bombay terror attacks, especially afterwards. You would have seen it especially so earlier this year when the Indian government had an encryption policy. You may have even heard about discussions in the United States and the United Kingdom, even more recently after the Paris terror attack. So people have said, do we need to do something further? Why I mentioned this is an example of people responding to security and saying we need to do something. Does it make security simple? No. Why? In, for example, conversations with people at risk, whether they be activists, community mobilizers, journalists across the world, the one thing that our technology team has often encountered is people need access to simple security tools. They need to have a security culture in organizations, and that means that if you're anyone, if you're they say, we're not worried, nobody will do something to us. I keep pointing out they may not do anything to you, but they may do something to your sources. Or people may not trust what's happening here. And this is again what I trust the internet, or to trust basic services. You need to believe, make sure they believe that they can really trust and rely upon what they're doing for every range of their behavior. The thing we noticed, for example, was after the Snowden revelations, people basically talked about the fact that they don't always trust modern technology. They worry about mass surveillance. They worry about intrusion. And you have seen in the last 6 months, especially, the number of data breach incidents that occurs from public, very widely known things like Ashley Madison, the marriage infidelity service, to facts that everyday services that people use, whether it's video gaming, things like the PlayStation Network, or even supposedly secure communications channels. Some of you who are startup guys would probably use Slack, which is a fantastic messaging service. Slack has had intrusion, and that's one reason why people don't use it. And that's where as a policy person I bridge. In all these conversations about security, governments and others say we need to do things. We need to pass laws, we need to make it stronger. In the US, for example, they passed a cybersecurity bill recently called CISA, the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, which talks about how private sector must engage with government on sharing about vulnerabilities. And I know there are many other people in this conference talking about that subject. On the other hand, government also tries to make security much weaker by saying that, by the way, this information you share, we would like to also use it for surveillance. And I can imagine at least half of the people in this room, at least the technical guys, saying that I don't mind sharing information to assert in order to prevent an intrusion or even to detect, say, targeted malware or even a cyber terrorist sort of incident. But I don't want it to be used for spying on a reporter or my client or my business contact. And that's where in this debate it's a tough battle. For example, the funny thing, as I keep saying, is about encryption and about digital security policy, which is a favorite topic of many governments. Many of them keep saying we want to do something, but ironically what they say is better for security actually undermines security. Because, for example, whether it's proposals in the UK, whether it was a proposal made in India, which thankfully our government withdrew, although they said they will bring it back for further discussion. They said that we want encryption, but we want backdoors. We want perhaps weak encryption. We want caps. So it's a question that we want security, but. And what I like to say is that if you want simple security, and if you want security, you need to just have security, which means that you should not be undermining. In fact, if you regulate, you should regulate to give more money to academia, more money for development of standards that are global and not even, say, depending on particular nations. So that's the interesting sort of discussion I see in my space, where you often talk to people, they say, we're very interested about security, we love to chat with you. But then they say, but we have some people non-enforcement coming to us with these concerns. Now these are valid concerns, it's a tough debate. But the question here we must acknowledge is, how do we establish a positive digital security and cybersecurity agenda that really works and that makes security simple? Because trust me, if you require permission, require licensing, to develop new encryption technologies, you're not making security simple. At least you're not making the development of security simple, let alone the use of it.
Fantastic, Ramesh. That was really insightful. I guess taking cue from what Ramanjit was saying, I think another aspect which I know lots of organizations worry of is the emerging technologies aspect. That wasn't me. With the advent of some of the emerging technologies which have come in, of course, they're supposed to make a technocrat's life easier and do things. The form factors look smaller, but is that also made life tougher for a security practitioner from a technology perspective?
Thank you. Thank you, Rahul. Yeah, yes, absolutely. But let me start by saying some of the fundamental basic things I want to get across here. The first thing about security we all know is there is no such thing as absolute security. Everything is relative. It's relative to the current technology space we've got. It is relative to the set of types of users who are using it. It's relative. So today, we may say, okay, I got these 10 threats. I can deal with 6 of them. I can live with 2 of them because it's too expensive to deal with. And 2 of them I don't know. That's effectively what a security policy does in a nutshell. So what Rahul posed is this technology. So what is happening in the world out there is clearly IoT, Internet of Things, or Internet of Everything. The big data are 3 areas which are causing havoc with the technology. It's a great thing from a technological perspective. But the lamppost is Wi-Fi enabled, could be Wi-Fi enabled. Your fridge is connectivity. Your microwave can be connected. Your watch is connected, right? So your TV is connected. So now, we talk about training security people, making them do the right stuff and so on and so forth. Now, what this type of technological changes? Let me introduce the demographical changes now. Demographical changes now, we have 5-year-olds using technology, maybe 2-year-olds, 75-year-olds using technology. Are we going to tell your grandma and your grandpa, you've got to be trained in this, you've got to do the risk analysis, you've got to do this? Well, we tried telling our kids exactly this. They didn't care with their Facebook and stuff like that. So I've been in security for 30 years and I've developed products which have sold billions of dollars, right? I mean, it's not a big, so I've been in this space and we make assumptions. Oh yeah, all the products we see, technologies, firewall, network intrusion, security policy, all this stuff. We want security managers to be like this. We want certified. Yes, we do that. Yes, that's an industry and we do that at the corporate level. But when we talk about the current state now, and that's what's going to happen in the future, where the demographic, the people who are going to use the technology are going to be younger, older. They may not be trained the way we think or we ought to. We say, this is the way you've got to be trained before you use your product. That's the way companies have developed products. But then we have to change our mindset. That's the first fundamental thing. Now, so there's another thing I want to just say before making a point. I think Raman made a fantastic point about trust, which is the key thing I want to come to finish off. But let me say one more point here, which is, your butterfly flies in Brazil, a bridge falls down at Sydney. That is the nature of systems, that, the cyber infrastructure, right? When we talk about security, events may happen in some part of your ecosystem which has effect on other parts of the ecosystem. Now, why I say this is, we have our grandpa and grandma and a 5-year-old using technology which affects the ecosystem. If there is a malware in the fridge, if there is a malware in a mobile phone that a 5-year-old is using, it goes into the ecosystem. Ecosystem is the cyber infrastructures which I and you use. It has the potential to spread. So on the one hand, the technological changes is happening. On the other hand, this demographical changes is there, or the way that people are using the technology and developing the technology is different. And then this effect on the ecosystem. So at the end of the day, let me just conclude with just one line. The fundamental thing with respect to both you user experience, and this is what today is about. The fundamental thing about both the user experience and security is trust. You take any security system that anyone has ever developed or will develop, it has to, you will go, there's always a trust. At the end of the day, there's a God you have to trust. But there's, I have an authority, I have a manager, okay, you can do all sorts of decentralization, but you will find certain root of trust or roots of trust. You will decouple, you will divide the trust into multiple entities, which we do in our systems now. But there will be some entity or set of entities you want to trust. That's for a secure system. From a user experience point of view, if you lose the trust in the user experience, it's finished. And the trust has got this fantastic thing, asymmetric thing. It takes a long time to build the trust, and suddenly it drops. So when Raman talked about trust is the key thing, yes, we as a technologist, when we want to develop our secure systems, yes, make it simple. We keep saying that for the last 40 years, and believe you me, security systems always want to start simple, but as the technology, the complexity of the software grows, Windows 7 software is about 70 million lines of code. SAP ERP system is about 300 million lines of code. They are not simple. We don't even know how to write 100 million lines of code, correct software, let alone secure software. That's the state of the art of the industry at the moment. So there are these are some of the facts we've got to face with. So what is the moral of the story? The moral of the story is we still need to survive and live in this world. I don't want to walk the downtown of Los Angeles at 10 o'clock at night because I may be mugged. I know that, but I still be able to get my business done in Los Angeles and come back, right? So in the internet, in the cyber infrastructure world, we will still need to get, make sure that path exists, that we get our transactions done, we have useful work done, despite the fact there is malware, despite the fact there are going to be attacks. That's the name of the game.
Thank you, Professor. That was fantastic. Just taking a cue from the user experience, Kai, I see you've got a very popular device right in front of you. So, are they, for you, any models of technologies where you feel that, from a user experience, they've been seamless and, it's a pleasure to sort of use them? At the same time, there's a workhorse behind really protecting your really critical data or the information that you would trust no one else with.
So I think you referred to my iPad, right? I often use iPads, iPhones, whatever I think there is.
Ramanjit used to work for Google, he wouldn't like you flashing that.
Yes, yeah, lovely, because then I don't have to go into the Android side, which is the opposite continuum. So the reason I like this is that Apple, when they created these devices, they took away the user choice. They built security in as a basis. Now, of course, we can debate that technical side of security, but it means that for me to provide my software on this device, I only have one small scope. Even if my software gets contaminated and done something, I don't give anyone more access to the device itself. So Apple made some very interesting choices here, choices that I hope that we will see more of in more technologies, including Google and others. And I'm sure that we will be seeing more of this as professors like you, sir, are working with these great corporations to see that we need to change the way we do technology to help end users being safe.
Thank you, build on them. So it's an interesting example, I think, that you mentioned here with Apple. So what they did do early on, and I think they receive credit for, especially with new rollouts and deployments of the iOS architecture, is that they made security the default option. You have to use it, and it is built in there. You can choose if you want in a complicated way to try and opt out, but by and large, it's very easy. I try to keep pointing out to people who use their Macintosh computers and MacBooks that if you're not using full disk encryption by default, it is no simple, polite way to put it, you're a fool. It's so simple to use, it's so easy, and it makes it your not just a security, but even the physical security of a device so much better. You should deploy it. And I like to build it, and I'd love to hear what Professor might say on this. But on trust, I actually think is more challenging because people, again, thanks to Apple in particular, have great trust in the amount of work they do, but you can't always easily check on the code because, as you know, in many parts of the Apple architecture, it's closed source. And that's an interesting battle you see with security people. They want security there to be by default, but you do want to be able to verify and audit the code, especially perhaps in the value chain as you deal with things which are more risky, or you believe there's greater danger. Now, that risk could vary. So for example, for many of you, you could say if you are involved with landing aircraft, as the facility nearby is, you really believe that should be secure. On the other hand, many of you, if you say, your 4-year-old is using computing equipment and a lot of their private data is there, you say that's as important. That's as important as an airliner landing as well, because the risk to a child if something goes wrong is enormous, and one would never, conscious anything that's there. That's where the ability to verify and to build up audit increases. Now, I mentioned this as an example even in everyday practices in my organization. For example, when using secure messaging services, there's often that tension. You say, there are some services who said that they have security on by default, and it seems great, but we can't fully verify the code because it's not available, it's not open. And that's when the challenge comes up there. Why that's the case is, unfortunately, as you know, this is a weaponized space, right? There are many people who have spent great effort in either finding exploits or occasionally even trying to build an exploits into the system. And that's one reason why it's worthwhile trying to focus on the tension of building in security by default, but trying to build it in an open architecture space. And why I mention this, you have good examples of that. For example, if you want secure messaging, you have a fantastic, widely available solution that's available easily, which is Open Whisper Systems, deploys a messaging app called Signal, which everyone can use and check. And by the way, if you're not fully comfortable with using that service, you might be happy to know that WhatsApp, which you now use, licenses at least certain versions of that technology to provide security or encryption, at least in transit, for WhatsApp messaging. Again, the fact that you can verify this is something that's fantastic. So for example, when Facebook rolled out its deployment of this technology, it got simply so many security plaudits because people said, yes, we've looked at their code, it's fantastic, we've tried to run intrusion attacks on it, we've tried to run other things there, we're not able to break it right now, this appears to be a gold standard for the moment and we can verify. Whereas sometimes if you can't look at the stuff, then it's security by, let's put it, complete trust or security by obscurity. And that's then a bit tricky to manage.
Thanks. Vijay, a question for you. Something which, caught on what you had said earlier on, that there's no absolute security, it's all relative. And I know for a lot of the practitioners here and people, I think the industry products which are usually used is, an IAM, an identity and access management. How do you think that's dealing with, the problem that you said, the different kind of users? Is the technology really moved with time on how they would, use that as the vanguard for the first level and really aligning itself with the various roles that people play in their organizations?
Yeah. Look, it's strange. I think definitely if you get a feeling that technology is moving fast. But the strange thing is, if when you're inside the technology space, I think we all know that technology doesn't move that fast. It still takes about, I can give you lots of examples. It still takes about 7 to 9 years, at least about 5.5, 6 years is probably the least for a technology to become productive. So you might have seen this done on the hype curve. There is this trigger, you get a brilliant idea, then you get this hype, this is the biggest thing, the best thing ever happens in this slice of bread. Then there's a depression, my technology didn't happen. Then it's slowly that this productivity is achieved by the technology. Even take, Facebook, just for the heck of it. Facebook was started in 2003, 2002, if you go on study, it still actually became 2007, 2008. It's still about 6, 7 years. So technology does move fast, I agree, but compared to 50 years ago, it does move fast. But it still takes about, mobile phone, any technology you take, it'll be about 6 to 9 years time frame. But having said that, can I just make the importance with the users? I think Ram made a point about very far, and that's the things we in the security community we've been doing it for many years. What we say is, okay, the first thing is yes, lock it down. Apple started earlier, Microsoft, everybody says, oh, I want to lock the functionality. In other words, when I ship a product now, I will not leave the option so that the user, when he gets the product, actually sets it up. I fix I default, make sure I take them the very close to case when I ship a product now, so that the user does not, by accidentally, can spoil the ecosystem, doesn't get into trouble, right? Then there's no attack. So they lock everything down. That's called security bind. Then there's this issue like closed. We come to the closed. There are two aspects of the closed. Now, there are some good things that happen in the technology space, like the app stores. You know, everybody has app stores now. What is the use of app stores is, you cannot get your app, your software, unless you get into this app stores. And the guys like, you know, the Apple, the Microsoft, all these guys who run the app stores, they can gate it. In other words, they can say, hey, you know, say for instance, you know, gated meaning both from a financial point of view as well as a security point of view. Let me tell you the security point of view. Security point of view is, hey, if and only if, you know, I'm going to run some rules on your software, and if and only you're satisfied, I'm going to put your software in the app store. So what that means is, generally the quality of app stores gives you the potential to increase the quality of the software, because I can gate it, right? That's a good thing. Similarly with the cloud, because most of the software are being redesigned, we can use better tools to verify the software code. And so therefore, generally cloud and this app stores can improve the software quality a little bit. But fundamentally, the issue comes from the user point of view. What is trust? How do I trust the software? Now, let me just take this 2 minutes to explain this notion of this trust and verify. The trust and verify protocol is very old. It's almost like 40 years old. When the nuclear ban treaty was signed between the US and the USSR at those terms in the Cold War, we used to trust and verify because there are mutually suspicious parties. They need to agree on something without showing each other completeness. They need to, and they say verify. More I verify the protocol, I'm able to trust you. But when I do the protocol, I tell you something, you tell me something, and if the protocol stops in between, so we break the negotiation, nobody is better off. That's the idea of the trust and verify protocol. But when you do this trust and verify with respect to software, the question comes, who is doing the verifying? Now, that's a very important thing. You know, end user usually doesn't have the ability to do the verification. Let's be honest about this. You know, if you have a big software, an end user is not going to do it. I mean, even if it is a bank, I'm saying end user can be a healthcare hospital bank or a grandpa, again, there are a variety of spectrum of end users. But whatever the end user is, typically they don't want to do the verification themselves. So what they tend to do is, hey, let me go to this third party authentication. You verify it and you give me a label. This is a good thing. And ISO is why, you know, all these labels comes in. And once you have these labels, and in the security world, we have had lots of labels for many years, and I used to take some of these products to get these labels that come from some deep, in the US, take a lot of things to be around. But it takes a long time. So forth. But then there's this other issue. Apple, people buy Apple products not because of these labels, these third-party is because of the brand. People used to buy HP printers because of the brand, right? So now the trust is a very complex notion. A, I give you some of these labels, things, and okay, it helps you bring trust. Or the brand itself helps you to give some level of trust. So in this software world, you know, trust and verify for large-scale software is a difficult thing. But let me just finally finish off with what is happening in the IoT world. Because we do need this. Because if I have a heart pacemaker, and with the heart pacemakers, which, you know, I could create a malware, I could send an attack here, I could kill you. It is not anymore the software system going on or the personal data, you know, your credit card number getting released or whatever it is. It is killing you. Take a smart car. If the car doesn't turn within a second, there's a delay of a second, it causes an accident. So when you get to these technologies, these types of verification, trust verification really does matter because it is physical damage, physical injury, people's lives matter. Not that this Lauren Ashley's, whether I went to escort service, my data got released or not, right? That's one level. That's the kind of state we are in at the moment, but soon it's going to happen. So the need to have, this trust thing for software on embedded devices, the only positive thing is most of these software and these embedded devices are not that complex. They are not, the code is not, it's not of the order of hundreds of millions of lines of code because these are very small devices, small applications. So that is the advantage. So we need to start thinking about that.
Thank you so much. I think I've been given signals here that I'm exceeding my time, but I won't be fair if I don't give the audience an opportunity to ask a few questions to this panel here.
slightly outside of security, but the principle is the same. We've been trying to change the behaviors and innocence does civilized behavior, or cultural behavior, things like that. The same techniques of measuring behavior and thereby trying to change it. It is successful in this security. Can you get right with those things?
So I'll repeat that. So the mechanisms and tools that we use to measure and change security culture can be applied those same mechanisms and principles outside of security scope. The short answer is yes, sir, we can. And the reason for that is that we apply social science techniques, which are basically based on everything else, right? And if you look at how society has evolved since the cavemen, then you see that we build more, we change our culture constantly, we measure it, does it work or does it not? If it doesn't work well, then we implement policies, we change technology, and we use the social part of social behavior to enhance and enforce that new behavior we want. So yes, sir, it is an excellent question, and it is one that we are working with, just don't tell it.
How does it work? In fact, actually, with the question I also trying to say one. The question is, so the question is that, the question is, who do you trust? See, today, if you look at it, you know,
Trust me.
well, that's more dangerous thing. Because just a little aside, there's a film saying, the hero says that you can believe somebody who says there is a God. You can believe somebody who says there is no God. But don't believe the guy who says I am God.
Yes.
So guy is not going to So the thing is that the question is who sets the standards? See, today, Google and Microsoft may be angels in the corporate uniform, if I can describe it. But who knows? There could be corporations, and these corporations are a very recent phenomenon in human civilization. The Industrial Revolution brought these big companies. And the kind of things that we hear in Volkswagen or something like that, they are not all angels in white dresses. So these are the guys who are going to determine the behavior of the common man in the society. That's also could be dangerous. So if we have a common standard, like the common criteria, that's all right. But how do we trust the guy who actually create these and put it across? That's the question.
Happy to answer that, and I want to say something. My hat as a lawyer, but I think you will also. I wanted to say you make trust by also enforcement. So this is the mix here. The challenge often, I think, in the space of digital security and cybersecurity is we try and force adherence to a standard. Say you must use this, and you think that standard will fix everything. And I know, for example, people have become criteria is fantastic. I know that people in telecom standards world have also had huge issues when you're mandated anyone to use the standard. Because sometimes it doesn't work with some technologies, and or, for example, isn't fast-paced enough, or there are other issues there. That's where, in fact, you would rather ensure that you have a holistic system which points out that if you commit this, we can enforce the data breach action against you, either a civil data breach action, or say as a data protection authority, or a privacy regulator, or in some cases specific, say, sectoral regulators, like in India, the financial sector. The Reserve Bank of India can bring actions against banks when they breach sensitive data requirements, have that enforcement power for them. The other thing to go back is the fuzzier question about trust. And I completely agree with you. Companies don't necessarily trust anyone now. No one is setting a standard. And the challenge is that with all of them, we need to create a better culture of security. Why I mentioned this is the one effort that we led, Access, which is a mix of evangelization as well as putting policy makers to put pressure. Because ultimately with security, I think going back to Kai, the point of anyone who works in security spaces, you are being a campaigner or a lobbyist, whether it's the government, whether it's with your own company, with everyone. Can we make security work better? And the one thing we tried to create is something called the Digital Security Action Plan. And it was 5 pillars, and I can just summarize it for you. It's about strong encryption on networks. It is about verifiable practices to secure data at rest. It was about maintaining security credentials, initiating notification and patching and vulnerabilities, a system for that, as well as algorithms time-to-time encryption as well as the education piece of security. What I want to mention here in all of these elements is that there's no one immediate answer. There are different ways you do this. What I would focus on, and this is perhaps the thing that you're key on, is these organizations that establish trust, they may be different sources. You want to make sure that their primary job is trust. One thing as a policy person I've always been struck by is how the people in government who do a fantastic job bringing all these people together and being able to say, trust each other, these are the credentials. They are said, by the way, make surveillance possible as well. So just by way of anecdote I want to give you, you would have also heard of NIST, right? The NIST in the US, which has done so much work there. The NIST also gets constantly lobbied by the National Security Agency that, can you help us? Can you build in vulnerabilities? And that's where we often need to act to say, let the security guys do their job. Let their job be security of systems, security of networks, and integrity of security of software. Not worried about that they also have to be the police people of national security. So it's a tough answer. My short thing is, you need law. You need to sometimes use law to push change, sometimes you need law to enforce. Sometimes you need to push industry and others to be open and transparent. And often also the technical level you need to work with technologists. And I really like, I think we can leave this question a bit so we can let you bit of
I have the last question.
Yes, briefly quick points for all the aspects.
I have one last question for you.
Oh, okay.
My question is about this bridge, the butterfly bridge collapse. This actually is a very important thing because as we see this internet coming into all the aspects of our life and business, the last part is, basically, do you foresee, Professor, that at some point that it's like a pack of cards that we are building? You construct a building with a pack of cards, and a small thing somewhere going wrong will crumble the entire thing suddenly, because all the financial systems and our machinery and everything is connected to the internet.
No.
And do you foresee something like that? Or some studies on that?
I don't. The reason is this, the key word is resilience. The focus of all our systems at the moment is building resilience. That's what I said earlier, survivability. Even when parts of our network fail, even our parts of our system fail, the other systems continue to operate. That is the name of the game here. But let me just quickly, one-liners for each one. So with respect to basically the whole research agenda of my research center that we do a lot of work on. Just one line on this stuff. Yes, we do social sciences. Reputation-based model behavior is the main common, is one of the major focus of security modeling stuff in the behavioral stuff. But if you want to look at behavior studies which are applicable, study advertising. I mean, we've been doing that for the last 5 years. Google, the whole IT companies, all these guys do a lot of behavior studies on advertising. You know, the way we generate revenue and business models and stuff. And that is the key that we are adopting. But sociology is the key answer to that with respect to security. Second, with respect to behavior statistics security. The second thing with respect to what who do you trust, and you actually said common criteria. I cannot let this session go without saying something about that. I was one of the ones who was involved in developing the criteria for UK, and then which led to ITSEC, and then which combined with the US DOD to form the federal criteria, and then which led to common criteria. So let me just correct one thing what you just said. Just like Microsoft or Google have requirements for their products, common criteria or the criteria that you're talking about are the requirements that if you want to do business with government, that is their requirements. If I want to sell a product to the government, here are the requirements. Hey, these are the criteria. It doesn't mean it applies to everywhere in society. This government is a big customer, I agree. But you've got to understand common criteria are the requirements of the government. That's how it started, and that's how it is. But yes, anything to do with civil, sorry, let me just make sure it is not defense military oriented, it is to do with civil products. Yes, the answer to trust, you know, who do you trust is a big question. You don't want to trust the corporations. Not all corporations are benign. You do not want to trust governments. Not all governments are benign. But you do want to develop systems which can work when there are attacks. There will not be a time that, oh, we cannot live in a situation where there are no attacks. There will always be attacks. But you want your systems to work in attacks. You want your child to cross the road, even though there are accidents happening on that road every day. You want your child to cross the road and come back home safe. That's the name of the game in security.
Fantastic. I think with that, and before we get physically removed from the dais, thank you so much. Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Ramanji. Thank you, Kai. It was a pleasure, and I hope you found it all as insightful as I did. And with that, I think we leave the next session to start. Thank you.